CISSP versus CCSP, InfoSec versus cloud security, Jordan versus LeBron. All right, maybe not that last one. I'm JB, this is Cyber Insight, and today I'm going to talk about two certs that I have that I get asked an awful lot of questions about, both the CISSP and the CCSP. So we're going to dive into this a little bit today, at least from my perspective, as far as which type of careers align with each of these certs, some of the logistical challenges behind both getting and maintaining them, and then we're going to talk about kind of some of the benefits that come along with those, both from the particular roles that you might be able to fill and then the salaries that come along with them. So I'm going to hop over in my browser, going to share some resources with you. As always, I appreciate you dropping in. Make sure you smash a like button. If you have any questions as we move through this, go ahead, throw those in the comments section. And if you haven't subscribed yet, definitely appreciate it if you do that. So let's move over here. All right, so there is a few different resources that I'm going to share with you. I've already taken and put those in the video description, so you can definitely go and dig into those. I've gone through these and kind of taken out most of the really important or salient points with each of these, but I just did want to cover these real quick before we dive into some PowerPoints, or not even PowerPoints, but just some slides I put together to kind of summarize what I think is kind of the key information here. So this particular website here kind of talks about a lot of the background information behind both of these certs, as far as who they're applicable to, some of the exam details. It's one of the better put together blogs that I've actually found out there that I think pretty much resonates with a lot of the same perspectives that I have in regards to both of these certs. So you definitely want to check that out. And in addition to that, when it comes to both the CISSP and the CCSP, ISC squared is going to be the authoritative source on all of the information related to the specifics behind these exams. So you're definitely going to want to go and check those out. I'm thinking about maybe doing some particular videos regarding diving into the domains behind each of these and maybe some study resources and things like that. So if you're actually interested in a video kind of doing a little bit more of a deeper dive into the CISSP or CCSP, definitely leave me a note in the comment section. And then we can definitely go ahead and set something up that kind of goes a little bit more in depth into that. But just high level, this is the authoritative source on the different things that are going to be covered here, and then also kind of the different types of examination information, which we are going to dive heavy into this here in just a minute. Worth pointing out here is that there is a new version of the CISSP that is coming out, I believe, let's see, today is the 13th. I believe the new one is coming out on the 15th. The domains stay the same. They ended up changing things up a little bit and maybe added a few different things underneath the domains. Normally, I found whenever a vendor changes certs, or not changes certs, but updates their certs, there isn't that much of a drastic change. So if you've already gone and bought material to study for this, you should be pretty good with that. Just go and check the different documentation that they have as far as the course outlines to see the gaps in that, and then just find some specific resources to study up on those differences. But normally it's not that big of a swing between the things that are covered. Again, same thing here as far as the exam outline for the CCSP. All of this stuff, all these different links in the video description. And then a few other things people always end up asking about salary stuff. We're going to dive into this quite a bit as far as the different salary to expect and the different types of careers that you normally see folks who have these different certifications dive into. And I think the last thing, especially for my friends and followers here who might be looking at doing government work, especially DoD work, one of the things that we end up hitting up quite a bit is the 8570 requirements for different types of roles within DoD. They've actually modified this. It's transitioning from 8570 to 8140. It's not really going to be too much of an impact. I think they're going to pretty much keep the approved baseline certifications moving forward and maybe tweak some things specifically, but we're going to talk about this as well. So to take all of that and consolidate that into something that's a little bit more digestible, I went and made this particular graphic here. And let me just pull that up. You should see that there. All right, so what we're going to talk about is a few different things. We're going to look at kind of the scope of which career fields these certifications are most important to. We're going to talk a little bit about the logistics behind each of these, and there's a lot of different information that goes into that as far as like what the test is like, how much it costs. It's an interesting certification, both of these, because you're actually required to pay an annual maintenance fee, just like a freaking credit card, right? So you got to pay to play. And then there's some continuing professional education credits that you're going to have to do to keep the cert active. So you won't have to necessarily go and take the cert over again, but there's certain types of educational requirements that they make you do to ensure that you're kind of still spun up on what's going on in the industry. And we're going to talk a little bit about the domains, talk a little bit about certain jobs that you might see folks who have these particular certifications. And then I know that the bottom there is very, very open-ended when it comes to talking about the salary. We're going to dig into that a little bit because there's a lot of different things that go into what those salaries actually mean. And a lot of people don't necessarily give context to that when they throw numbers out. And I think it's a conversation that's worth having to make sure that you have the right information when trying to judge and compare these two different certifications. All right, so I see a few different comments and questions coming in. I'm going to throw these up real quick. All right, I've been debating on either the CISSP or CCSP. Perfect time on stream. Awesome. So hopefully by the end of this, it's not confusing and you'll have a little bit more information to help guide you one way or the other. Or maybe you decide that you're going to end up taking both because there is some overlap in certain things, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. Do you believe that these can both be achieved in a year? I mean, that really comes down to how much experience you have within the different domains that's covered here. And one of the things that we're going to talk about kind of under the logistical aspect of both of these certs is the requirement for the amount of years that you need to have within domains that cover or fall underneath the particular certifications. So you need to have a certain amount of years working in regards to things that the certs cover. And so, like, let's say if you've been doing cybersecurity and InfoSec and maybe some cloud stuff for 10 years, you might be familiar with a lot of these things, and that might not necessarily be a challenge to you. If you maybe have been on the cybersecurity side, but not the cloud side, then that might be a little bit more difficult studying for the CCSP. If you're coming into this strictly from the IT side and haven't really been looking at things through the cloud side, it's going to be pretty challenging. I mean, anything is possible, but it really is going to come down to the individual person and their background. All right, so looking at kind of what these particular exams are scoped for. So looking at the CISSP, we're talking about folks who work in security. I'm going to say InfoSec because that's really what it is. It's not just cybersecurity. It's also all of protecting different types of data and information. So it really is InfoSec, which covers, person-to-person communications and communications that happen, over different methods other than just talking on a computer. So having a broad understanding of information security concepts, principles, and they're involved in designing, implementing, managing security programs within an organization. Tying that back to the DoD 8570 stuff, you see that the CISSP really is a requirement for more senior level individuals. That's where we kind of see that come across more often. Compared to the CCSP, it's not looking at InfoSec. It's strictly looking at cybersecurity within a cloud environment. So we're looking at architecting and designing and implementing cloud security solutions, as well as folks that might be responsible for managing cloud security policies and procedures. So it's definitely something that is a lot more specific and locked in. There is an awful lot of overlap, though, between the strategy and some of the tools and technologies that you might end up see implemented both at an enterprise level and within a cloud environment. So they do kind of play off each other nicely in some ways. For me personally, I went and got my CISSP. I mean, I'm going to date myself here. Back in 2008, I had about 5 years of experience and I had a bachelor's degree. My background was definitely more so on the telecommunications and networking side of things. And at that point, and I still might argue, I mean, I went and got a CCNP, I've taken the CCIE written exam, I've taken a whole bunch of other exams. Studying for the CISSP at that point was definitely the most challenging thing that I've ever done from an exam perspective, just because back then it covered so many different topics, and not all of them are things that might necessarily be relevant to what you do within your job role. So the current one has 8 domains. Back when I took it, it had 10 domains. And I think I was probably familiar with maybe 3 or 4 of those domains. And the rest of it was all stuff that was completely new to me. Now, it didn't necessarily go super, super in depth into those particular topics, but because they were things that I didn't necessarily deal with on a day-to-day basis, it was stuff that I had to learn and understand to be able to pass the exam. Contrasting that with the CCSP, I took that and passed that, I think maybe a little bit over 2 years ago. So at that point I had, I don't know, maybe 16 years of experience, 17 years of experience, and had background in some cloud stuff and all the architecture background that I had. So at that point, it was a much easier exam because I also had taken multiple ISC squared exams. We're only talking about the CISSP and the CCSP today, but I actually also have their architecture specialization certification, which out of everything, I actually would say that that one is the one that's more closely aligned with the CCSP. It's pretty much like an architecture exam for cloud environments. The scenarios and things like that, I think, very, very closely related. And once I got done taking the CCSP, I was like, this was exactly like the ISSAP. I'm going to screw up the acronyms in this throughout this live stream for sure. And don't ask me what the acronyms actually mean, because I would definitely get that wrong at least once or twice before we actually figure out what the S and the S in CISSP stand for. We definitely would jack that up. Let's see. Let's move on to talk a little bit about the logistics behind each of these, because it's a heavy lift. It's a bear. These are definitely hard exams, challenging exams, and yeah, let's dive a little bit into that. So looking at the CISSP, it's 240 minutes. That is the length of time that you have, so 4 hours. And it's somewhere between 125 to 175 questions. They're multiple choice, but the interesting thing with the CISSP is that they're adaptive. So when you take it, depending on how you do out the gate, if it can tell that you're answering questions and you're doing really well, it actually will start to give you harder questions or give you questions in other areas that you maybe haven't necessarily been answering as many questions in, or have been struggling in answering questions with. So it's a little bit of a pain in the ass that way. Luckily for me, when I took mine, it wasn't adaptive, but it actually was a bit longer. So instead of 4 hours, it was 6 hours, and it was 250 questions. And yeah, this is really going to date things. It had a freaking Scantron sheet, and you had to fill stuff in with a pencil. That was absolutely insane. It was wild. I took it, I think, in like a what was it, like a hotel conference center. There probably was like 100 other people taking it. I've never seen that large of a group of depressed people, except for like going to the DMV. It was absolutely nuts. Contrasting that with the CCSP, still same length of time. You have 4 hours. This is locked in 150 questions, and it is still multiple choice, but not adaptive. So it's not going to try and figure out the areas that you're weak in and adjust the questions that you're getting. It's just you're randomly going to get whatever those questions are out of the base of questions. In order to pass it, you need a 700 out of 1,000. That's the same across both of those. The cost, there's a little bit of a cost difference. CISSP is about $750, where the CCSP is about $600. I don't know why they take $1 off of that. Just freaking round it up. Go 750 and 600. I mentioned that one of the interesting things with these exams is that you have to do continuing education credits, and they call them CPEs. Depending on the exam that you pass from them, you have 3 years to fulfill a certain amount of hours, and there's a whole bunch of different types of activities that you can do that count towards these hours. So if you go and you take a class, you go to a security conference, you write a blog post, you make a video, you volunteer, there's tons and tons of different things that you can do to earn hours to cover your continuing education credits. A little bit of a difference there with the 120 versus the 90. Cool thing is that depending on the certs that you have from them, there is overlap in those particular CPEs. So if you plan things out the right way, what you do for your CPEs could cover the requirements for both of these certifications. I mentioned the CPEs. The other thing is that there is a $135 annual maintenance fee. So it's like having a Amex Gold card. You gotta pay that every year, as well as have the CPEs to stay locked in. The good thing with it, though, is once you have one cert from them, it's not like that annual fee doubles or triples or whatever like that. The 135 covers as many certs as you end up getting through ISC squared. Now, the thing that always ends up biting people, and you see this a lot on Twitter and other people talking about people recommending, oh, hey, you need to go get your CISSP because it's going to just like blow your career up and stuff like that, is the requirements for the years to be able to actually get validated for the certification. So you can go and you can take the certification, you can pass it, but you actually are required to have a certain amount of years within those particular domains. And so for the CISSP, it's 5 years. You can waive a year if you actually have 4 years and a undergraduate degree. And then on top of that, you have to get somebody else who already has a CISSP to be able to sign off on your package and sponsor you. So be careful if you're kind of just getting into the industry, you're just starting to get spun up, and people are giving you recommendations of pushing you towards this certification. They're lying to you. Don't let them take your money. There's a lot of other certs that you can do that are going to get you on the right path and build you up, and just put your time in, get your experience. And if you end up in a situation where it makes sense to go after either of these, then do it when the time is right. I believe you can go and take the exam. You'd pass it. I think they call it like a CISSP associate. That means you passed it, but you don't necessarily meet the requirements. I don't know. That's not going to help you from a 85-70 perspective if you're trying to get into government stuff. And, it's great that you passed it. Maybe some people will, if they're hiring you, they'll consider it the same, but it's not quite the same as actually having the cert with the experience and sponsorship that goes with that. Now, looking at the same stuff from the CCSP perspective, it's a little bit lower on the amount of continuing education credits that you need. So instead of 120, it's 90. The requirements is 5 years. Same thing as the CISSP. Within the domains that's covered within the CCSP, there's a little bit of waiving of different things. So you can do 4 years with a degree, or they have a lower level security certification called the CCSK. You can do that. You still need to go and get the same sponsorship that we talked about before. So you're kind of in the same boat there. And that's why this is really a certification that you end up seeing people that are more kind of like mid-career and senior going after. All right. Any questions on any of that while we're here before we dive into the different domains? All right. If not, then we can go ahead and we can do that. So the way that they break these exams down is they call them domains. These are kind of like different areas that you need to be familiar with different types of topics, and then they get into very, very specific things within that. The thing that people like to say about the CISSP is they say it's a mile wide and an inch thick, and that's completely true. So they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions related to these topics. You're going to need to know them, but it's not necessarily the questions themselves aren't overly challenging. If you have background in the topic areas, where the challenge comes is if maybe you only have some background in 3 or 4 of those domains and the other 5 you aren't necessarily familiar with. The other thing across the board with any ISC squared exam that you take, and this is a thing that always bites people, and that is they are looking for what they deem as the closest or best solution based off of the information that they put into their common body of knowledge. So even though you might work in the real world and you might have experience and what you think or have seen or witnessed as being the best answer towards something within their exams, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be what the right answer is when it comes to the exam. And people run into this all the time. It really comes back to what they have documented within their common body of knowledge, and that's why studying their material is super, super important if you want to pass the exam. So looking at the domains for the CISSP, talking about security and risk management, asset security, security architecture and engineering, communications and network security, identity and access management. It's definitely a big one that we start to see, especially as we're getting more into solutions revolving around zero trust, and where kind of identities is kind of the big thing that we're trying to use to secure environments, making sure that the right people have the right access to things and other folks don't. Security assessments and testing, whether that's from a SCA perspective or from a pen test. Security operations, so maybe stuff maybe from a SOC perspective, and then software development and security. That definitely would be my weakest area because I am not a software developer. But you'll get into different types of methodologies and tool sets and things like that folks use. Contrasting that with the domains for the CCSP, we're looking at 6 domains. There's an awful lot of overlap kind of in some of these concepts from a high level perspective, but uniqueness that you end up running into specific to working within the cloud. So we're talking about cloud concepts, which is completely unique to the cloud environment. Architecture and design, which there is some overlap there. Cloud data security, cloud platform and infrastructure security, where you're going to see some overlap between that and similar types of things that you would do within an on-prem environment. Cloud application security, again, some overlap there between software development security. Cloud security operations, which there is a security operations domain for the CISSP. And then legal risk and compliance. This is where you're kind of going to get into the GRC stuff. Those are going to be much more specific to the cloud environment, but there is some other higher level frameworks and things like that that get used within the cloud that you also would use within an on-prem environment. So when it comes to like, all right, who are these certs actually tailored for from the perspective of I work within InfoSec, this is my role, I'm interested in cert, you know, which one is kind of the better one to go with. So from a CISSP perspective, again, we're talking about overall InfoSec. So security consultants, if you're doing any type of InfoSec or cybersecurity management, if you're doing any type of auditing, so GRC types of things, if you're a security analyst, network architect, and they say CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, I would say even if any type of security engineer, honestly, anyone who's an engineer, the information that's in this is beneficial to know, especially once you kind of get to the mid and senior levels, because you're just going to be interacting with other groups. You should be baking InfoSec and cybersecurity principles into kind of your overall operations and builds and things like that. And so there's definitely a lot of information in there that makes it so that you can have important conversations with other stakeholders and other people from other teams and kind of get things all on the same page. For me, when I passed this, I think I just recently got my CCNP, and this was kind of just like a nice layer of general InfoSec and cybersecurity that I could layer on top of that. Now, looking at the CCSP, obviously we're talking about things that are completely cloud-based. So cloud security architect, cloud security engineer, any type of consultant dealing with the cloud environment, security managers, and cloud compliance auditors. So again, kind of like the GRC aspect within the cloud. Now, I'd mentioned the 8570 baseline. It's kind of some interesting things with that that's kind of worth pointing out. So let's move over to this. The CISSP just covers a whole bunch of different roles. And if you aren't necessarily familiar with this, go check out the that link that I put here. I'll bring it up again, just real quick for you so you can see. These are the different levels. Obviously, as you kind of move over to the right, they get a little bit more senior. These are like technician levels. These are management levels. These are kind of like architect-y type of levels. And then you get into things related to cybersecurity and SOC types of things. And so depending where the role is that you're in, if you're supporting the DoD, or organization that maybe is just using their baseline as a guide for hiring people, just kind of want to see where you would fall into in regards to the role that you're trying to apply for. So if I bring that back up, the main thing that we see with that is that the CISSP covers a whole bunch of different levels: the IAT levels 1 through 3, IM levels 1 through 3, and then the IASAE, that actually, I need to correct that because that's actually levels 1 through 2. It does not cover the third level. So I'll make a correction to that, but it is just levels 1 through 2 on the last one there on the bottom. The main point with this is if you're looking at the CCSP, it covers a lot less. So we'll cover all the technician levels. It won't cover the management level. But the cool thing is from the architecture side, there's only 3 certifications you can have from the third level from the architecture side. So if we look at that, right, I'm sorry. If we look at that, let's pull that away. There we go. Then we are looking down here and we see it's either the CISSP ISSAP, which is another cert that I have that's architecture specialization. They have an engineering specialization, and then the CCSP also falls into that, which is pretty cool. One unique thing for whatever reason with these particular roles down here, it's not necessarily backwards compatible. So even though you have this CCSP, it doesn't necessarily work for these first 2 ISAE roles, which is kind of weird. But for whatever reason, that's the way that they're doing that. Yeah, so really the CISSP covers a lot more bases here, but there are some unique situations, and this is pretty much the only role here where if you're trying to get that, the CISSP won't cover it, but the CCSP definitely will. Now, if we go back and look at the last thing at the bottom here, we were talking about the salaries. And I've seen a whole bunch of different sources when it comes to this, and you're going to see numbers all over the place. Average salary, $120,000, both for the CISSP and the CCSP. I've seen more specific ones that maybe are up in the 140 range for the CISSP and in the 120 range for the CCSP. And I think when we talk about those types of things, we're kind of, I don't know, doing a little bit of an injustice to it, because it's not meaning that if you go and you get that cert, you will automatically get that salary. What that means is that when they take polls of people and they tell them what their salary currently is, they mention all the different certs that they have. So an individual could have a CISSP and they could have 15 years of experience, and they could have a graduate degree, and they could have name a whole bunch of other super senior level certifications. Maybe they have a CCIE, or maybe they have a I don't know. I'm trying to think of something else that would like really have a very one of the professional level AWS certs, right? And so they have those, and they're making $220,000 a year, right? Then obviously that's going to throw off whatever the average salary is. I think it's fair to say, and especially if we move back into some of these salary exception, or not salary exception, but like these salary blogs that I have here when it's looking at salary guides for the different certs. Depending on where you are and the role that you have, and how long you've been in the industry, it can vary quite a bit. I mean, even looking at this here, right? So, a cybersecurity manager, average salary from pay scale, $150,000. They have, and taking into account, they have a CISSP for the data that was collected for that. Compared to a engineer, it's almost $30,000 less, right? And they have other things that kind of go into this, looking at different levels and how that affects a career. Locationality plays, a bit into that, and then also obviously the industry that you're in. So just take all those things into account. I think it's fair to say that with both of these certifications, like the average salary for people that have them is pretty decent, is pretty high. But I wouldn't necessarily go into anything expecting, if you have this certification and not much else, that you're going to be making at the top end of that, because I can go find people that make $500,000 a year that have these certifications, and I'm sure that I can go and find people that make $70,000 or $80,000 a year that have these certifications. So it really does depend on a lot of the other things that play into that. Again, looking at the CCSP, different numbers here. Again, over 120, they're talking about average salary 137. Locationality, it does seem that, which is interesting, on the cloud side of things, this certification is paying less. I wonder if that is due to more engineers maybe going and getting this certification compared to on the CISSP side. Maybe it's more management and senior level folks that have been going and getting the certification, and maybe so that's why the salary bands are a little bit different there. You can see here average salary based off of experience level, and you see like, okay, now you see some people that have a decent amount of experience, and the salary level is closer to 200K. So all things to take into account when looking at those things. Now let's just see. I think that pretty much covers all the different areas that we were going to do there. Let's move back here. Does anybody have any other questions before we go and wrap this up? If you don't have any questions at the moment, totally cool. You can go ahead and throw those in the comment section. I appreciate folks dropping in here on a Saturday. Yeah, make sure you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, all those other good things. And if no one else has anything, then we can go ahead and wrap this up. So appreciate everybody dropping in. Hope you have a good weekend, and yeah, we'll chat soon. All right, bye.